What do Julius Caesar, Hannibal, and Robert E. Lee have in common? The answer lies in the hills of Gettysburg. Long before the gunpowder smoke of Gettysburg, war was waged with phalanxes, chariots, and disciplined legions. From the battlefields of Thermopylae to Cannae, generals shaped the fate of empires through strategic genius. These ancient methods weren't relics, they were reference points. Centuries later, their lessons echoed in the minds of U.S. military leaders. At West Point, cadets immersed themselves in classical warfare, learning that flanks win battles and that high ground is sacred. Gettysburg wasn't just a battle, it was a test of ancient principles, clashing in a modern hellstorm. The ghosts of antiquity marched silently beside the men in blue and gray. The dream of America, united, prosperous, free, was cracking under the weight of its greatest contradiction, slavery. Political compromise had delayed the inevitable, but the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln ignited Southern fears of abolition. 11 states broke away, declaring independence and igniting civil war. The North, stunned but resolute, declared that the Union must not be dissolved. Cities, families, and even brothers found themselves on opposite sides. While politicians debated and newspapers roared, soldiers marched toward destiny. War was no longer rhetoric, it was reality, and the very soul of the Republic was at stake. Gettysburg would become its most defining moment. As 1863 unfolded, the Confederacy had momentum. Victories at Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville had demoralized the Union, and General Lee believed it was time to strike deep into Northern territory. Pennsylvania offered a tempting target: rich farmlands, potential supplies, and political leverage. Meanwhile, the Union Army of the Potomac reorganized under George Meade, a capable but untested commander. Lee sought to fracture Union morale, possibly forcing President Lincoln to consider peace. But as Confederate troops moved through the Blue Ridge and Shenandoah valleys, Meade followed, always a step behind. Their collision course was set, not in Washington or Richmond, but in Gettysburg. July 1st dawned hot and heavy with tension. A Confederate division probing Gettysburg met Union cavalry under General John Buford. Outnumbered, Buford fought brilliantly, delaying Southern forces until reinforcements arrived. But the Union line was stretched too thin. As Confederate divisions poured in, Union troops were pushed back through town in bloody retreat. They fell back to the high ground, Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill, but failed to hold all of it. Lee saw the opportunity. With the Union army disorganized and reeling, he believed he could finish the war within days. But the Union would dig in, and Meade was ready to fight. On July the 2nd, Lee launched a ferocious assault on the Union flanks. His goal, break the Northern line in two. At locations that would become legendary, Peach Orchard, Wheatfield, Devil's Den, men clashed in brutal close quarters. Blood turned the earth to mud. On Little Round Top, Colonel Joshua Chamberlain's 20th Maine made a last-minute bayonet charge that saved the Union left. It was a symphony of chaos, bravery, desperation, and madness in every direction. Meade held his ground, shifting troops like a grand master in a deadly chess game. As night fell, the exhausted armies braced for one final day. The fate of the nation hung in balance. July 3rd, at precisely 1 p.m., the ground trembled as 150 Confederate cannons opened fire in thunderous unison. The Union responded in kind, and the sky turned black with smoke and fire. Then, across a mile of open ground, General George Pickett led 12,500 men in what would become the most infamous charge in American history. They marched shoulder to shoulder, banners high, into a storm of lead. Union forces held firm behind stone walls, mowing down the advancing line. The charge reached the Angle, the high watermark of the Confederacy, before collapsing in blood and ruin. Lee had gambled everything. He lost. Silence returned to Gettysburg, but not peace. Over 50,000 men were dead, wounded, or missing. The once quiet town became a sprawling field hospital, and the dead were buried in makeshift graves. Locals spoke of the stench of death lasting weeks. Letters home old stories of unspeakable horror and unexpected heroism. For the Confederacy, the campaign had failed utterly. For the Union, it was a much-needed victory, but a costly one. Gettysburg marked a turning point, not just in strategy, but in morale. The myth of Confederate invincibility had been shattered, and the North found renewed purpose. But the war was far from over. On November 19, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln arrived at Gettysburg to consecrate a national cemetery. The crowd expected a long speech from the keynote orator, Edward Everett. Instead, it was Lincoln's brief 272 words that endured. He reminded Americans that the war was not just about territory, but about principle, that all men are created equal, and that a government by the people must not perish. His words transformed the meaning of the war from preservation to transformation. Gettysburg became not just a battlefield, but a symbol, a reckoning, and Lincoln's voice echoed across generations, binding past sacrifice to future hope. In military academies worldwide, Gettysburg is still studied for its lessons in leadership, logistics, and human will. The decisions of Meade and Lee, the timing of reinforcements, the importance of terrain, all are dissected in classrooms and war colleges. But Gettysburg's legacy goes beyond textbooks. It showed that democracies can endure civil strife without collapsing. It became a cultural touchstone, a site of pilgrimage and national memory. In fiction and film, its lessons have inspired generation after generation to understand sacrifice, courage, and the cost of division. Gettysburg was not just a military victory. It was the reaffirmation of a nation's ideal. Today, Gettysburg is more than a battlefield. It's a mirror. It forces us to confront what we're willing to fight for. Tourists walk its rolling hills, reenactors revive its battles, and schoolchildren memorize Lincoln's words. Yet its meaning is not frozen in 1863. In times of political crisis or national doubt, Americans still look to Gettysburg for clarity. It teaches that unity is not inevitable, but earned, that freedom must be defended, that heroism often wears the face of the ordinary. Gettysburg was 3 days of terror, but its legacy spans centuries. It's not just history, it's prophecy and promise. Its soil holds the weight of sacrifice, and its silence speaks louder than cannons ever did. In an age of noise and division, Gettysburg reminds us what it truly costs to preserve a republic. To walk those grounds is to walk alongside courage, loss, and hope. If you found this story as powerful as we did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. History's echoes deserve to be heard, and you can help keep them alive. Join us as we explore the turning points that shaped our world. Your support keeps the past speaking to the present.